Broussard, when Chris Paul was traded to the Thunder for Russell Westbrook, many wondered how long it would take OKC to flip the 9-time All-Star. But shockingly, suitors did not come running for a 34-year-old point guard who still has 3 years and $124 million left on his contract, with a recent report saying the Thunder are not in a rush to trade him. Chris, how much does CP3 have left in the tank?
Well, I know last year he had career lows in points and field goal percentage. He's always been pretty efficient, shot 42% last year. But I chalk a lot of that up to the system and the fit. Now, I think the first year he was there, it worked because he was just all in. I'll do whatever it takes to try to win a championship. After they didn't win it, I think this year, I think the tensions mounted with him and Harden. He got more and more frustrated with the way they were playing, and I think that has something to do with his decline. But I think his game is still there. Not quite what it was, but I still think he can be very effective. He's in his 15th year. Steve Nash led the league in assists his 15th year. John Stockton was still fairly effective. I think he can be effective. The problem with Chris is two things. One, the contract, and his injuries. Like, injuries are just a part of his existence now. The last 3 years, he's missed over 20 games because of injuries. And by the time the playoffs get here, he tends to be worn down. And so that's the biggest problem with him. But I do think he has a lot of game left and could help a contender. The thing is this. As long as he's in OKC, it really doesn't matter how much game he has left because they're all in on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as their point guard, and they should be. He's a great young point guard. You have to see what he can do. Is he the guy you want to build around in the future at that position? So Chris, as long as he's in OKC, it's almost like he's going to be kind of off the ball something there too if he's playing, or more in a mentoring role for, say, Gilgeous-Alexander.
With respect, I totally disagree with you on the fit part of it. Because year one, listen, Chris Paul, to me, there's 2 years of him with the Rockets. Everything up until the end of Game 5 of the Western Conference Finals and of this first year and everything since then. Because that first year there, his numbers were almost identical to what he put up the last year with the Clippers. His points per game, his field goal percentage, his three-point percentage, his rebounds, assists, they were all very similar. And then last year, it was the injuries. It was his field goal percentage drops from a career of around high 40s, 46, 47, down to 42. His three-point percentage drops from being in the high 30s to 36%, 35.5% last year. All those numbers fell because, to me, he was even visually in a different place in his career. Defensively, he was not as dynamic as he had been. He was one of the best on-ball point guard defenders we had in this league for a long time, even though he's so small. So I still think he's an effective player, by the way. If there was no salary cap, if money didn't matter, you would absolutely want Chris Paul on your team, potentially. But the one thing that I think you also left out is there was a third thing that's hurt him. And that's his style of leadership. There's a quote, I forget who reported it, so I apologize, but that early on in this season, he and Harden got into something somewhat meaningless. And Harden looked to him and said, man, it's always something with you. And that, it was about the set they were running. And that is a trend for Chris throughout his great future Hall of Fame career, is he grates on people. And I would imagine you grate on people even more when you're no longer the best guy on the team, when you might not be the second best guy on the team. So that's where the fit's going to be tough for Chris, because do you want him to mentor? Do you trust him to mentor young players? How will he be the first year, gosh, since his rookie season, where he's on a team that doesn't have championship aspirations? Like, these are real questions no matter where he ends up.
So, do you think this is the beginning of the end of his career, or do you think he's just had 2 sort of tumultuous years chemistry-wise in Houston?
No, it is. You can see the writing on the wall. And when you watch NBA players and you watch their skills deteriorate, none go faster than smaller point guards. That's just the way it is. My good friend Isaiah Thomas, he talks about it all the time. It's hard to age in the NBA as an undersized guy. He's had a great career, but this is not surprising. Nick talked about this a couple years ago. When that disappointment in game number 5, when he got hurt, and then they had that wink-wink agreement that they were going to give him that max deal, Nick was saying then, hey, man, it's going to be ugly at the end. We just didn't think the end
was going to be the beginning.
Yeah, but what got him out of Houston was their pursuit of a championship, but he spoke a lot of truth on his way out. Now, Nick talked about him and his leadership. Harden,
sure.
Is he a great leader? Let's not get too carried away with that.
That's
one.
Totally fair.
The coach there, the owner, hadn't necessarily helped the situation. He's not a seasoned veteran as far as that's concerned, but we knew this was going to get ugly for Chris Paul. When he decided to go there, if they didn't win a championship, if they didn't get beyond Golden State, they were going to be, at least you could say, well, wow, he brought us a championship, so we don't mind paying him. But this is the life in the NBA of a great point guard at the end of their career. Where do we expect him to go out? Like, how is he supposed to continue to be athletically dominant as a undersized point guard, man? He's shut down people for years. One of the top leaders in steals around the league. This is the way they age right before our eyes.
Yeah, no question about it. And when you look at who might want him, like Miami, that was the talk. They're not going at him that aggressively.
No.
Because even if you get him, what are they? A middle-of-the-road Eastern Conference playoff
They
team?
didn't want to pay Dwayne Wade. And his jersey going to be in the rafters.
Right.
They had that little dispute. Dwayne had to go away. They brought him back, but not the kind of money they paying Chris Paul. So if they didn't want to pay Dwayne Wade, why would they give Chris Paul that type of money?
I do think, though, last year, I think Chris Paul's morale dropped.
Okay.
And I do think that has something to do with his poor play. Again, I'm with you guys that he's clearly on the decline. But I think the first year he was just excited, hyped to be there, hyped to have a chance to win a championship in a different environment. Last year, I think his morale sank because of the situation with Harden.
And I think one of the reasons I'm higher on the Rockets' acquisition of Russ Westbrook than maybe the other people at the table is because I feel like the market for Chris Paul is going to prove to be minimal to non-existent. I think OKC is going to have to end up attaching picks to him to get someone to take him. And so when you look at where the Rockets were,
I don't think there'd be a great market for Russell if he was on if he could be traded. I don't think there'd be a great market. Not to Chris Paul.
No, I understand what you're saying.
I think we would be shocked, too, because he's got a bunch of injuries, that wear and tear on his body.
He's got a similar contract situation. I understand that. But the point that I'm making is I think you're going to see across the league that Chris Paul, unfortunately, even though if his play doesn't say it should be, is looked at as a negative asset. Like his level of play, when you combine it with the contract, that you're going to have to include things to get someone to take him away. The Rockets obviously did include picks, but what they got back was a top 20 player in the league. The fit we'll see about, but I think Chris is going to start on OKC, and then maybe Minnesota. Maybe they try to give Karl Anthony Towns a point guard for the first time in his career. Either way, there's no obvious fit for him.
Gotta take a break. You need some hot water. Broussard, we'll see you later in the show. Coming up, should Zeke's contract
He's like a balloon.
Cowboys' top priority? Next on First.
Fighting through it, America.
Yeah.